So, given the distance and even sailing easy to allay seasickness, it should be in sight by now. Unlike the approach of Vermandois, the foppish brother of the King of France, who had come close to losing his life by drowning in stormy seas, the Adriatic was flat calm. Those who knew how to read the weather, master mariners who had sailed these waters all their lives, pronounced with the nature of the sky, added to the direction of the wind, such conditions would likely hold for days. John Cominius, Toptirites of Durazzo, had been given a task to perform, and it was one to be applied only to the host from southern Italy, more specifically to Bohemund. Prior to landing, he must swear an oath to the Emperor Alexius, which would bind him to the aims of the Papal Crusade and, if possible, imperial service. In short, the Count of Taranto must make assurances he had come to aid Byzantium and not, under the guise of assistance, to attempt what had failed before: outright conquest. The Norman leaders of South Italy had eyes on the imperial purple, hankering after it as an adornment for their own shoulders. As a race, they were avaricious for land and plunder, no better than the Viking forebearers who had settled along the banks of the River Seine, and so harried the Frankish king he had been obliged to cede to them the whole peninsula from which they now took their name. It had not stilled their appetite. Formidable warriors, they had become a permanent menace instead of an occasional one. Increasing so much in numbers, they threatened not only France, but also neighbouring Anjou, and ultimately their own suzerain, the Duke of Normandy. Those who first came south to Italy were the rebellious, the landless, and the discontented, amongst who were the first two de Hautevilles, subsequently to be joined by 5 more brothers. Employed as mercenaries to fight for Lombard independence, they had, in less than 50 years, cast aside their erstwhile paymasters, then wrested the centuries-held provinces of Langobardia and Calabria from imperial control, before invading and conquering Saracen Sicily. Despite the odd reverse, they had bested Byzantium in battle after battle to become first Counts of Apulia, and then, after papal recognition, this body too had suffered more than one military defeat at the hands of the Normans, had become acknowledged in their ducal titles. Never likely to be sated, they had turned their gaze east, seeing the remains of the old Roman Empire as weak and ripe for a fall. If they had tried and failed, it had not dented their desire. What better way to introduce the force necessary to accomplish total conquest under the guise of this religious endeavour called a crusade? So, the man who commanded at Durazzo was not about to let such a puissant general as Bohemund ashore without a pledge of loyalty. To aid his cause, John had the ability to deny them a landing at the eastern edge of the Via Egnatia, the road to Constantinople, added to the lure of a trouble-free passage with plentiful supplies provided en route. This would obviate the need to forage or, more importantly, oblige the Norman leader to raid his own chests of gold to pay for the things necessary to keep his army fed. Given such advantages, he was sure he could impose the imperial will on Count Bohemund as well as his senior captains. The man who spoiled this comfortable illusion of security came while the Toptirites was eating in his own chamber. Chapter 1. One of the piquet boats approaches, Your Honour, and she is flying an alarm pennant. Cominius was confused, and it showed both on his face and in his reply to the messenger from the battlements. If we are not overburdened with friends, I cannot think who would be an enemy so threatening as to cause a piquet boat to hoist such a pennant. The Norman devils? That answer had about it the air of, who in the name of the Lord else, you fool? Cominius carried the burden of having his place by family connection rather than experience, and this showed.